Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 191, The Pike Massacre, Part 2, The Investigation. So you've probably already done this, but if you haven't already listened to Part 1, please check that one out first in our feed below, and then join us back here. In the meantime, I'm going to do a brief recap of last week's episode, where we went to rural Pike County, Ohio, on the morning of April 22nd, 2016. A horrific day. 8 people, members of the Roden family, were shot execution style as they lay sleeping across 4 different properties. If you'll recall, the victims were the family patriarch, Christopher Roden Sr., his ex-wife Dana, and their 3 children, Frankie, Hannah Mae, and Christopher Jr. Also killed were Frankie's fiancée, Hannah Hazel Gilley, Christopher Sr.'s older brother Kenneth, and their cousin Gary. Now, the night of these unspeakable murders, Frankie's 3-year-old son and his 6-month-old baby, along with Frankie's sister Hannah's newborn daughter, were the only family members that had been left alive in those homes that night. And as you'll recall from last week's episode, as news spread that Roden family members had been murdered, the community was beyond shocked. They were downright terrified, especially the rest of the Roden family, who were still not only dealing with just utter disbelief about what had happened the previous night, but why and who would execute 8 members of their family in the dead of the night? And were the rest of them even safe? Because later that afternoon, the sparest of details were revealed at a joint press conference between the AG and the sheriff's office. Here's then Pike County Sheriff Charles Reeder.
That this investigation is very large, one probably the largest in Pike County that we've ever had and been a part of. It's very tragic. There's a family that's lost 8 members. I want everybody to be patient, but understand that we are working around the clock, 24 hours a day, working on every lead that comes in, all the tips, conducting the interviews. We will provide information as we can, but this is going to be a very lengthy process.
Also, then, Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine weighed in.
This was a pre-planned execution of 8 individuals. It was a sophisticated operation, and those who carried it out were trying to do everything that they could do to hinder the investigation and their prosecution. And I just state that because, as the sheriff has indicated, we would anticipate that this could be a lengthy investigation. This is not your case where someone's got mad at somebody else, they shot them, there's a witness, 2 witnesses. It is very, very, very different type case. So let me also say that while we will continue to provide you with information in regard to what we are doing, as I just did with the tips and the interviews and the 18 pieces of evidence, what we are not going to be able to do is to provide you results. That may frustrate you, may frustrate members of the public, but our goal, we have to keep our eye on the goal. And the goal is to do everything within our power in this investigation to find these people or this person who has done this. We will not be telegraphing or telling the bad guys everything that we know. So we will continue to have briefings. We will continue to have information going out. But as the sheriff indicated, I think this could very well be a lengthy investigation.
We're going to get to what evidence they actually did have early in the investigation, which at that time they weren't sharing with the so-called bad guys. The information that they were sharing wasn't exactly reassuring for the community, let alone the Roden family, who were gobsmacked about what had happened and if they were even safe.
As far as public safety concerned and the citizens of Pike County, I've spoke with the family. It's very evident that they were a target of this horrible crime. Now, me and the Attorney General spoke with them. I cautioned them that they were a target, and I told them to be armed. For the other citizens of this county, I don't believe that there is an issue. I've taken the precautionary measures to contact other sheriffs. In the past days, we've had over 100 persons in this area, including extra deputy sheriffs, investigators, state patrol, patrolling the roadways in that area, out-of-county people patrolling county lines. We are very accessible. Anything out of the ordinary needs to be reported to local law enforcement so we can check it. I can tell you, if you are fearful, arm yourself. If you feel that you need to protect yourself or family, do so, and contact the local law enforcement to come and respond to it. I cannot guarantee myself. We have almost 30,000 citizens in Pike County covering 797 road miles and 444 square miles. I took an oath to serve and protect my county, and I will do so to the best of my ability. But I cannot promise any one of those 30,000 that I can be there to stop anything. We will be available. Anything suspicious, report, and I will make sure that someone, including myself, is accessible to be there. This was very methodical. This was well planned. This was not something that just happened. This was something that planned. A family was targeted. Most of them targeted while they were sleeping.
Sheriff, is there a drug problem in this area?
There's a drug problem in most areas around here, and I would say there's a drug problem here.
There's a drug problem throughout the state of Ohio.
Now, one of the obvious questions at the press conference, given the nature of how this family had been murdered, people wondered, had this been a cartel hit? But the sheriff made it clear that he did know of the Roden family, but only because of their deep roots in the community, not because of any criminal activity.
I have never been involved with that family in a criminal nature, and I've been in law enforcement locally for 20 years.
Another question, who was the intended target? Was it one specific person and the other family members were some sort of collateral damage? Again, I think going back to the cartel hit. I mean, when an entire family like this is targeted, people want to know why. They want to understand why this could happen and if the other family members were at risk or perhaps the community at large in some way, that this was the beginning of some larger coordinated attack.
Look, all eight people that were murdered.
Yeah, they were all murdered, and they were all murdered execution style. So they went after all of them.
Although many fears weren't quelled at this press conference, and not a lot of details were shared, other than how many family members were targeted and the horrific nature of the crimes. Even so, a promise was made.
It is very emotional to find out that 8 people of your community were murdered, okay? And that emotion is widespread throughout this county. All I can do is ensure that we're working around the clock, that we're working in conjunction with multiple agencies so that we can search and find who is responsible for this.
Let me just mention from a personal point of view, I've been in Pike County many times over the last few decades. This is a wonderful county with wonderful people, beautiful place. To raise a family. So my heart just goes out to the family members, but also to the whole community. This is something that very few people, fortunately, ever have to experience in a small county like this, to have 8 of their fellow citizens murdered in a calculated manner. It is just horrible. And so my commitment to the people of Pike County is that from the Attorney General's point of view and BCI point of view, nothing is more important that's going on in the state. We will continue to have dozens and dozens of people here we will be with this investigation and with the sheriff until we find out who did this.
So after this commitment was made, and just as the presser was wrapping up, the Attorney General dropped a bit of a bombshell, sharing one last detail. And it was an important one.
Let me go ahead, and I think it's okay for us to confirm that we did find marijuana in three locations.
Near the crime scenes or at the crime?
At the crime scene.
Like bags of marijuana?
Grow operations?
These are grow operations.
This was a community that had been hit hard by the opioid epidemic, and that detail, coupled with the execution-style killings, In a very muddy press conference where nothing was really clear, except for one thing, that 8 people had been methodically executed, that this was planned and ruthless, and that it was clear to investigators from the beginning that these killers did everything that they could to make sure that they weren't going to get caught for this, or at least that's what it seemed, which further fueled speculation. Were the marijuana grows found at these properties related to local drug dealers and/or the cartel? And from the beginning, the Attorney General Mike DeWine called in the big guns, the Ohio Bureau of Investigation. This is the state's top agency, and they were on hand to lead the investigation along with multiple other agencies, including the FBI, in what would mushroom into the largest investigation in Ohio's history. However, days would turn into weeks with no information, no persons of interest, no suspects. At least none that investigators were talking about. However, the so-called Pike Massacre remained in the national spotlight because of the horrific details that had been shared. There's just something about the image of a newborn and a 6-month-old being covered in their parents' blood. And when it was revealed that it was believed that one or both of these babies had been nursing at the time that their mothers had been murdered was just, and even after, goes beyond cruelty. It goes to a place inside our hearts that wants, if not answers, then revenge, and at the very least, justice. Someone had to pay for this abomination. But as months continued to tick by, media attention stalled, and the family continued on without answers because they had no choice. And agony for those trying to pick up the pieces. I mean, how do you even move on when you lose 8 people in a community where family is everything? How do you move on when you still don't have answers as to why their family was targeted? I mean, you just can't. But behind the scenes, more than 800 tips, interviewing over 400 people, working around the clock, police piecing together a case with very little physical evidence. Because even though every family member had been shot to death, there had been no murder weapon left behind at any of the 4 crime scenes. No suspect DNA or fingerprints. As far as physical evidence was concerned, the only thing they had to work with were some shell casings, which had been left behind at the crime scenes, which gave investigators a window into what they believed possibly happened that night, that it was more than one killer, because 3 separate guns had been used, and there were shoe prints. 2 distinct left shoe impressions had been left behind in blood from different sized shoes, one 10.5 and the other 11. And from all of those tips and interviews, detectives had also put together a victimology. What was going on in the lives of the Roden family and those who were closest to them? If this case was going to be solved, it wouldn't be from a quick DNA hit, but rather shoe leather detective work, which takes time because you have to separate theory and speculation from rumor and gossip to get to the truth. And the number one theory in the beginning was being ruled out, that this was not a cartel hit. It just didn't track with the circumstantial evidence that they had when they paired with the family's victimology, which included their habits and habitats. Because based on 3 of the 4 crime scenes, all the victims had been killed in their beds, most likely as they slept, which was a clue in and of itself. It told investigators that whoever did this most likely used a silencer to muffle the gunshots. Otherwise, someone would have gotten up at the first sound of gunfire at these different locations where there were multiple people that had been murdered. Another thing, not a lot of people knew that Dana, Hannah Mae, and Chris Jr. had recently moved into a house down the street from Chris Sr., Frankie, and his fiancée, Hannah Hazel. If you'll recall, Chris Sr. and Dana were divorced, and he'd bought a house for her, Chris Jr. and Hannah Mae and her 2 children to live in. And they'd only been in that home for a short time before they were murdered, which pointed again more towards the theory that whoever did this was close to the family. They would have to know that Dana and her children had recently moved there. Whoever did this had intimate information down to the footprint inside these homes, because at night out in the country like that, it would have been really dark inside these homes, which meant the killer or killers had been inside before. They knew where the people slept, their habits, their routines, their dogs, because Chris Sr. and his older brother Kenneth both had dogs that were trained to protect their properties. Any barking, at least at Chris Sr.'s house, would have alerted Frankie, at least, who lived 250 feet away from his dad. But the dogs didn't bark because they didn't perceive that the intruders were strangers that posed a threat to their families. Another thing, the execution of this family in their own homes was brazen for a very specific reason. Nearly every family member that was murdered had a gun nearby. Some even slept with them. And then there was surveillance footage. Both Chris Sr. and his older brother Kenneth, they were the ones that had those marijuana grow operations on their properties. Both of them had cameras. And yet not only had the cameras been dismantled, but the footage was taken, which meant the perpetrators of this crime knew about the cameras and where they were placed, and also where the video was uploaded to. Based on this circumstantial evidence, the cartel theory was ruled out, especially because someone, or I should say, another theory was taking shape that needed to be ruled in or out, because as the investigators kept digging into people close to the Rodens, especially those with intimate knowledge of their lives and habits, one name kept coming up: Jake Wagner. In fact, it was the whole Wagner family. But before we get to Jake, we need to start with his dad, Billy. Basically, Jake's dad, Billy, was best friends with Chris Roden Sr. They went way back. And Billy was married to Angela. They had 2 boys, George and Jake. Now, Jake and Hannah Mae, Chris Roden's daughter, remember, she was murdered and her newborn baby was left alive. But Hannah Mae also had a 2-year-old daughter who hadn't been with her the night she was killed. She'd been with her father, Jake Wagner. So if you're tracking, Chris Roden Sr., remember, he had been murdered in his trailer alongside with his cousin Gary. And Chris Sr. was best friends with Billy Wagner. And Billy's son Jake started dating Chris's daughter, Hannah Mae, who got pregnant and had a baby with Jake when she was 15 and he was 20. Now, at some point when Hannah was pregnant, she left her family home and went to live with the Wagners. And it was a culture shock. Angela, Jake's mother, was said to have been very controlling and involved in raising Hannah and Jake's baby girl. In fact, it got so weird for Hannah with Jake's mom, Angela, inserting herself into her relationship with both Jake and the baby that Hannah just couldn't take it anymore, and she left and moved back in with her mother, Dana. So after the murders, obviously Jake was interviewed. He was a person very close to her, and it would be natural that he would be interviewed by police, as all close family members were. But Jake professed his love for Hannah Mae, and he said even though they'd parted ways, he still loved her as the mother of his child, and that his own parents loved her like a daughter, that he had nothing to do with the murders, and that his own father was best friends with Hannah Mae's father, Chris Sr., who also had been murdered. And as if to prove his point that there was no bad blood between them, he explained that they shared custody with their daughter and that things were so good between them that he'd visited Hannah Mae just days before, after she'd given birth to her second daughter. Now, at the time, Hannah Mae had already moved on, had a new boyfriend, and Jake wasn't the father of Hannah's new baby. And yet, he told police he'd recently put together a crib for Hannah's new baby. Initially, investigators believed Jake. His alibi checked out. He'd been at home with his family the night of the murders. But when other Roden family members heard about the rosy story that Jake had painted for investigators, they were incensed. They said actually the opposite was true, that ever since Hannah Mae had left Jake and started dating someone else, that her ex and through him his family had been pressuring her to relinquish custody of their daughter, and that Hannah Mae was actually terrified of what they might do to her to get custody. And Hannah Mae had a right to be scared because she firsthand was a witness to what the Wagner family was capable of.
What about you as far as during the time that you lived with the Wagners? Were you coming and going in the same fashion that Hannah Mae was?
No.
Tell me about that.
I wasn't allowed.
And what do you mean you weren't allowed?
George and his family would not let me.
That's Tabitha, Jake's older brother George's ex-wife.
Can you tell us what the kind of daily living environment was there?
Wake up, eat breakfast, go feed what animals we had, and then take care of the house.
And were there any restrictions on your daily life, I guess? And so are you saying that it was Angela's choices?
Yes.
Then, okay. And did George go along with those choices?
Yes.
And can you tell us, you said Angela's house, Angela's rules. Did that apply to anything other than just your family coming and going?
It applied to basically everything.
And Hannah Mae had a front row seat of what Angela and her boys were capable of when it came to getting what Angela wanted.
What the family dynamics were there when you lived with the Wagners?
Very strange and controlling.
And when you say strange and controlling, can you tell us what observations did you make? What makes you say that?
If Angela made a rule, then you had to follow that rule.
Tabitha found out the hard way that life, up close and personal with the Wagner family, wasn't what she thought it would be. She married George in the summer of 2012, after she graduated from high school. Right after that, she moved in with George and his family on their farm. A year later, Tabitha gave birth to a baby boy, and not long after the birth of their son, Hannah moved in with the family. By then, she was pregnant with Jake's child. But life on the Wagner farm for Tabitha was far from bliss. Angela, George and Jake's mother, ruled everything and everyone, especially Tabitha after she gave birth to Angela's grandchild.
And once you had your son, who spent the night with you in the hospital?
George's mother.
George and his mother, or just George's mother?
Just his mother. George went home.
Did you want your mother at the hospital?
Yes, I did.
Daily life at the Wagner farm for Tabitha was like an emotional and psychologically destructive Groundhog Day, having to live and relive not meeting Angela's expectations, while at the same time being let down by her husband in a really devastating way.
You said Angela's house, Angela's rules. Did that apply to anything other than just your family coming and going?
It applied to basically everything.
So tell us about that.
Cooking, cleaning, laundry.
And what do you mean by that?
It all had to be done the way that she wanted it, or have to either redo it or she'll just do it herself.
Can you tell us, were there also rules that applied to the types of sexual relations you and George could engage in?
Yes, she said that if you give blowjobs, you'll go to hell. And you had to only have sex to have children.
And is that something that she said to you?
She said it to me and George both.
Well, where would you be when those conversations would occur?
Usually at the kitchen table or in the bedroom.
Whose bedroom?
George's.
And would you stay in George's bedroom?
As long as I was allowed to, yes.
So when you say as long as you were allowed to, tell me what you're talking about.
Well, towards the end of the night, she would usually have me leave so she could sit there and scratch his back and talk about the day.
So Angela would come into the room that you shared with your husband,
Yes.
and she would ask you to leave, and then she would scratch his back and talk about the day.
Yes.
How frequent of an occurrence was that?
Every night?
And after she was done with that, would you return to the room?
Yes.
Where, after you had your son, where would he sleep?
Most of the time he would sleep with Angela and Billy.
And again, was that your choice?
No.
Where did you want your son to sleep?
With me in my bed, or at least in the crib that was bought for him,
Okay. And where was that crib located?
next to my bed.
According to Tabitha, the Wagner family isolated her from her own family, wouldn't let her leave the farm, and controlled her every move. At some point, Tabitha got tired of Angela's control and she wanted out. The situation came to a head after Tabitha defied Angela. This was shortly after her son's first birthday.
And can you tell us what led up to that argument?
Me not cleaning the kitchen after Angela had made lunch.
After Angela had done what?
Made lunch.
Okay.
That day, Tabitha had started cleaning up after lunch, but then she heard her son wake up from his nap. He started crying. He wanted his mommy. She went and laid down with him, and that's what she was doing when Angela and Hannah Mae had come back after shopping, and all hell broke loose.
Angela and Hannah come back and see that I didn't clean up the mess. Then me and Angela start to argue.
Did you explain to her what had happened?
Yes.
And what happened then?
George didn't like that I was yelling at his mother. He came in and started smacking me with a belt.
And what happened then?
We went to the bedroom.
And when you say we, who do you mean?
Me and George.
And what happened there?
I was going to go out and sit on the porch so I could calm down and not be so angry.
So you wanted to go outside to just be by yourself, calm down, and not be as angry?
Yes.
Okay. Were you permitted to go outside?
No.
How were you not permitted to go outside?
George stood in front of the door and wouldn't let me.
And what did you do at that point?
I bit him and tried to rip his nuts off.
When you say you bit him, where did you bite him?
On his arm, up towards his armpit.
Okay. And why did you bite that area of his arm? What was he doing at that point?
He had his arm against the door, not letting me go through it.
Did he let you pass at that point?
He grabbed a hold of his nuts so his arm moved, so that's whenever I ran out the door.
And then what did you do?
I started walking through the yard, and then George and Angela came outside to try to tell me to come back inside.
And what happened outside?
I told them that I was not going to go back inside, that I was going to leave. And so Angela threw a board at me and then told George that she's going to go inside and get a gun.
Believing George would follow his mother's commands, Tabitha ran and hid underneath a truck, believing her life was in danger.
And did you have any more contact with them while you were still there, hiding under George's truck?
No.
Did you see any of them? Did they
There
appear
were flashlights.
You said there were flashlights, plural? More
Yes.
than one flashlight?
Yes.
And at this point, where were you?
I was still underneath the George's truck.
Imagine hiding, terrified, fearing for your life from the blast of your mother-in-law's gun as flashlight beams search the ground near you by what you know is most likely your husband, his brother, and their father. Eventually, those beams of light headed off into another direction, far enough away for Tabitha to grope through the darkness as she made her way in the direction toward a garage where she knew her bicycle was. And once she hopped on that bike, she was gone, pedaling into the darkness. 7 miles away, on a lonely country road, she headed toward the nearest gas station.
And did you make it to the gas station?
Yes.
Did you encounter anybody along the way?
Yes.
Tell us who.
George and Jake in their red Suburban.
And what did they say to you?
They were trying to get me to get in the car so we could go home.
Did you agree to get into the car?
No.
What, if anything, did you say to them?
I told them that I wasn't going to live with them if they're going to hit me.
And what happened then? Or did you tell them where you were going?
I told them that I was going to go to the gas station so I could call my mom so she can come and get me.
At the gas station, she borrowed the cashier's cell phone to call her mother and ask her to come pick her up. It was then that the cashier offered to call the police for her, but Tabitha declined. She just wanted her mother. And as she waited at that gas station, a police officer pulled up, and he tells her that the Wagners had called the police on her. They did this as she was riding her bike to the gas station. And it was at some time when she was in the back of the police car that the Wagners rolled up at the gas station, including Hannah Mae.
Did they remain in their car or did they get out of their car?
They got out and talked to the cop that was there.
And so the police also were there. What happened then?
The Wagners left and I was still sitting in the cop car waiting for my mom.
So you were at some point you got into the cop car?
Yes, he had me sit in there.
Did you become aware that the Wagners or George, someone filed a complaint against you?
Yes.
Okay. And what type of complaint was that?
Domestic violence.
And what was alleged against you?
That I was causing a big fuss at home and dragging my child across the floor.
Did you drag your child across the floor?
No, I did not.
Within weeks, Tabitha is served divorce papers. George offers to drop the domestic violence charges if she signs away custody. Temporarily, he says, until she gets back on her feet and gets a job and gets a place to live. And after that, then they can go back to a shared custody arrangement. A broke, vulnerable, trusting Tabitha signs the paperwork, relinquishing custody of their son to George. But really, it's to Angela, who in essence, with her son's blessing, to raise their boy as if she was his mother, not his grandmother.
After we got divorced, it was about a year before I got to see my son again.
Not long after Tabitha left, Hannah Mae began to see the same pattern repeating itself between her and Angela. And she gets to the point where she can't take it anymore. And she leaves the Wagner farm with her and Jake's baby. She goes back home to her family on Union Hill Road. In fact, it's her return that prompts her father, Chris Sr., to purchase the house down the street from his so that Hannah Mae and her 2-year-old daughter and newborn baby could live with his ex-wife Dana and their 16-year-old son Chris Jr. nearby. By then, Hannah Mae had moved on from Jake. She'd started dating another man and had gotten pregnant. And at some point, Hannah Mae reached back out to Tabitha through Facebook and apologized for not being more supportive when they lived together with the Wagners. Here's Tabitha describing that conversation she had with Hannah Mae via Facebook.
Okay, do you recognize that as a message you received from Hannah?
Yes.
Okay, and if you could go ahead and tell us what it says.
It says, I just want to say I'm sorry for being a bitch when you was down there and being rude and shit. That's honestly not who I am. That's who I was told to be. But you can text me if you want, if you have my number.
Tabitha and Hannah Mae discussed how she'd lost custody of her little boy to the Wagners and was still trying to get back joint custody of her son. And Hannah Mae shared with Tabitha that the Wagners were really trying to pressure her to give up custody of her daughter to Jake and his family, but that she wasn't going to do it. What Hannah Mae didn't realize was that Angela had the passwords to all of her social media accounts and had read her private conversations that she'd shared with Tabitha over Facebook Messenger, including one in December of 2015, when Hannah Mae told Tabitha that she would never sign over custody of her daughter to the Wagners, and that they'd have to kill her first to get their hands on her daughter. She wrote this in December of 2015, just 4 months before she and 7 of her family members were executed in cold blood. Next time on Criminal Mischief, the final episode in our little mini-series on the Piketon Massacre.
They were to take revenge against anyone who went against them, including but not limited to Special Agent Scheider, Sheriff Reeder, and Attorney General Mike DeWine. There was also discussions of how they would try to make an escape.
I've seen their work. I know what they're capable of. We've been very cautious, making sure that security plans have been in place in my home and others.
And stick around, because up next, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will discuss the case in more detail, as we do every week in our Criminal Mischief bonus content. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Ossorio, your writer and host.